Nina Torres adjusted her worn jacket as she walked through the glass doors of Lawson Industries. 3 months had passed since she started working as a junior accountant, and every morning felt like a fresh opportunity. The building towered above the city streets, its modern architecture reflecting the success of its owner. Nina smiled at the security guard Thomas, who always greeted her with warmth despite her humble position in the company hierarchy. The office buzzed with activity as employees rushed between meetings and phone calls. Nina settled at her small desk in the accounting department, surrounded by stacks of invoices and financial reports. Her computer hummed to life, and she began her daily tasks with quiet determination. She never complained about the workload or the long hours. This job meant everything to her family back home. The ritual after dark as the sun began setting over the city, Nina gathered her belongings and prepared to leave. Unlike her colleagues who headed straight home or to happy hour gatherings, Nina had a different destination in mind. She walked 3 blocks to a small grocery store. It's the same one she visited every evening without fail. Inside the store, she'd carefully selected items within her tight budget. Bread rolls, bottles of water, protein bars, and occasionally fresh fruit when prices allowed. The cashier, Mrs. Kim, knew her routine by heart and always packed everything with extra care. Nina paid with cash, counted down to the last dollar, then walked back toward the office building. The community she served on the sidewalk across from Lawson Industries. A small group of homeless individuals had made their temporary home. Mr. James, a 70-year-old former teacher, sat on a flattened cardboard box. Beside him were Rita, a middle-aged woman who once worked as a nurse, and Tommy, a young man barely out of his teens. They recognized Nina's approaching footsteps, and their faces brightened. Nina crossed the street and knelt beside them, her smile genuine and warm. She distributed the food items, taking time to chat with each person. Mr. James told her about the book he was reading from the library. Rita shared news about her daughter who lived in another state. Tommy talked about his hopes of finding steady work. Nina listened to every word, treating each person with dignity and respect. The conversations lasted nearly 30 minutes. Nina laughed at their jokes and offered encouragement when they felt discouraged. She never rushed through these moments, never made them feel like a burden or obligation. To her, they were friends who deserved the same kindness anyone else would receive. Eyes from above, high above the street, on the 38th floor of Lawson Industries, Victor Lawson stood by his office window. The 52-year-old CEO had built his empire through shrewd business decisions and calculated risks. His reputation for being cold and distant preceded him in every boardroom. Employees whispered about his demanding standards and his inability to show emotion, but lately, something had captured his attention in a way business deals never could. Every evening around the same time, he found himself drawn to the window. He watched the young accountant from the finance department cross the street and spend time with the homeless community. At first, he thought it was a coincidence or perhaps a one-time gesture of charity. However, as days turned into weeks, Victor realized this was Nina's daily routine. She never missed a day, rain or shine. She never brought cameras or posted about her actions on social media. There were no witnesses except the people she helped and the CEO watching from above. The questions began. Victor returned to his desk, but concentration eluded him. He pulled up Nina's employee file on his computer. Nina Torres, 26 years old, junior accountant, hired 3 months ago. Her performance reviews showed dedication and attention to detail. Nothing in her file explained why someone earning an entry-level salary would spend money helping strangers every single day. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled under his chin. In his world, people operated on self-interest. Charity events happened for tax deductions or public relations. Donations came with naming rights. Nobody gave without expecting something in return. Yet here was this young woman defying every rule he understood about human nature. Victor pressed the intercom button on his desk. His assistant, Patricia, answered immediately. She had worked for him for 15 years and knew better than to question his requests. He asked her to compile a detailed report on Nina Torres, including her work history, education, and any public information available. Patricia confirmed the request without hesitation. A pattern emerges over the next several days, Victor found, himself timing his evening schedule to coincide with Nina's departure. He told himself it was mere curiosity, nothing more than observing an interesting behavioral pattern. But deep down, something else stirred within him. Something he had not felt in many years. Each evening played out the same way. Nina would leave the office, walk to the store, purchase food, and spend time with the homeless community. She never rushed. She never looked at her phone impatiently. She gave them her complete attention, as if they were the most important people in her world at that moment. Victor noticed other details too. Nina wore the same 3 outfits in rotation, suggesting a limited wardrobe. Her shoes were practical but worn. She brought lunch from home in a simple container. Everything about her suggested someone living on a tight budget, yet she consistently chose to help others before helping herself. The puzzle deepens. Friday arrived. Victor received Patricia's report. He read through it carefully during a rare, quiet moment in his schedule. Nina came from a working-class family in a small town. She had put herself through community college while working multiple jobs. Her mother was a housekeeper, her father a factory worker. She sent money home every month to help her younger siblings with their education. The report only deepened the mystery. Nina had every reason to keep her money for herself and her family, yet she chose to share it with strangers on the street. Victor closed the folder and stared out the window once more. He had built a fortune by understanding what motivated people. But Nina Torres remained an enigma he could not solve with logic or business sense. As evening approached, Victor made an unexpected decision. For the first time in years, he would leave his office early. It's not to attend a business dinner or social event, but to get a closer look at the woman who had disrupted his carefully ordered worldview. He grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator, uncertain of what he hoped to discover. Monday morning arrived with dark clouds hanging over the city. Nina entered the office building, shaking raindrops from her jacket. The weather forecast predicted heavy storms throughout the week, but she had no intention of changing her evening routine. Mr. James and the others needed her support regardless of the weather conditions. Victor arrived at work earlier than usual, something that surprised even Patricia. He moved through his morning meetings with unusual distraction, his mind kept returning to the question that had haunted him all weekend. He needed to understand what drove Nina Torres to make such sacrifices. The numbers in her file told one story, but he wanted to hear her story in her own words. During lunch hour, Victor did something he rarely attempted. He left his office and walked through the accounting department. Employees straightened in their chairs as he passed, nervous about the unexpected visit from the CEO. He found Nina at her desk, eating a simple sandwich while reviewing spreadsheets on her computer. The first real conversation, Nina looked up and nearly dropped her sandwich when she saw Victor Lawson standing beside her desk. Her heart raced as she quickly stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. She had only seen the CEO from a distance during company meetings. Having him at her desk felt surreal and slightly terrifying. Victor offered a slight smile, an expression so rare that nearby employees exchanged surprised glances. He asked if they could speak privately for a moment. Nina nodded, unable to form words. She followed him to a small conference room, her mind racing through every possible reason for this meeting. Had she made an error in her work? Was she being fired? Once inside the conference room, Victor gestured for her to sit. He took the chair across from her, maintaining a comfortable distance. His demeanor remained professional, but less intimidating than his reputation suggested. He began by asking about her work, how she found the company culture, whether she felt challenged by her responsibilities. Nina answered honestly, relaxing slightly as the conversation continued. She explained that she enjoyed the work and appreciated the opportunity to learn. She spoke about her goals to grow within the finance field and eventually pursue additional certifications. Victor listened intently, noting the passion in her voice when she discussed her aspirations. After several minutes of professional discussion, Victor shifted the conversation. He mentioned that his office overlooked the street in front of the building. He had observed her evening routine with the homeless community. Nina felt heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassed that someone had been watching. She wondered if this violated some company policy she had overlooked. Victor assured her that she had done nothing wrong. He simply wanted to understand her motivation. In his experience, people rarely gave without expecting something in return. Yet she seemed to give freely every single day without seeking recognition or reward. He asked her directly what she gained from this daily practice. Nina took a moment to gather her thoughts. She explained that she gained nothing material, but the act of helping others brought her peace. Growing up, her family had struggled financially. There were times when kindness from strangers made the difference between having dinner or going hungry. She remembered those moments vividly and wanted to provide the same kindness to others who found themselves in difficult circumstances. She spoke about Mr. James, who had taught elementary school for 30 years before losing everything in a series of unfortunate events. She described Rita, whose medical bills from a car accident had pushed her into homelessness despite years of working as a nurse. She told him about Tommy, who aged out of foster care with no family support or safety net. To Nina, they were not statistics or problems to be solved. They were people deserving of dignity and compassion. A shift in understanding. Victor listened without interrupting. Something about the way Nina spoke, the genuine emotion in her voice, struck a chord he had long thought silenced. He found himself seeing these individuals not as abstract concepts but as real people with real stories. Nina's empathy was not a weakness or a naive worldview. It was a strength that came from lived experience and genuine care for others. He asked another question that surprised even himself. He wanted to know how she managed financially while maintaining this routine. Nina hesitated before admitting that it was challenging. She lived in a modest apartment, cooked simple meals at home, and rarely spent money on herself. She sent what she could to her family and used the remainder to help others. Sometimes the budget was tight, but she always found a way to make it work. Victor felt something stir within him that he had not experienced in years. Admiration, respect, perhaps. Even a hint of shame for the cynicism that had guided his life for so long. Here was someone who had so little yet gave so much. While he had accumulated wealth beyond measure, but rarely thought about using it to directly help individuals in need. The storm arrives. Conversation ended when Nina realized her lunch break had extended far beyond its usual time. She thanked Victor for his interest and returned to her desk, leaving him alone in the conference room with his thoughts. He sat there for several minutes, processing their exchange. Something fundamental had shifted in his perception, though he could not yet name exactly what had changed. That evening, the predicted storm arrived with full force. Rain pounded against the windows as employees hurried to leave the building. Victor watched from his office as Nina emerged from the main entrance carrying her small umbrella. The wind immediately turned it inside out, rendering it useless. She tossed it in a nearby trash bin and pulled her jacket over her head. Despite the downpour, Nina walked toward the grocery store. Victor grabbed his coat and took the private elevator to the ground floor. His driver waited with the car, but Victor waved him off. He wanted to see this for himself. He wanted to understand completely. Walking in the rain, Nina emerged from the store carrying 2 plastic bags heavy with supplies. The rain soaked through her jacket within seconds. She crossed the street to where Mr. James, Rita, and Tommy huddled under a torn tarp stretched between 2 poles. They looked miserable in the cold and wet conditions. Nina knelt beside them, seemingly unbothered by the rain or the puddles soaking her knees. She distributed the food and added something extra today. Warm coffee in insulated cups from the store. The homeless individuals accepted the gifts with grateful expressions, though Mr. James protested that she should not have come out in such terrible weather. Nina laughed and told them she had survived worse storms. She stayed longer than usual, making sure everyone had what they needed. She asked if their sleeping arrangements were adequate for the night, expressing concern about the dropping temperature. Rita assured her they would find shelter at a nearby church that opened its doors during severe weather. The offer Victor watched from beneath the building's awning, rain dripping from his expensive coat. He had never felt more ashamed of his comfort and privilege than in this moment. When Nina finally said goodbye to her friends and turned to leave, she found Victor standing in her path. Her eyes widened in shock. Before she could speak, Victor made an impulsive decision that would change both their lives. He offered her a ride home. Nina started to refuse, citing the same independent spirit that defined her character. But Victor insisted with unexpected gentleness. He explained that no good deed should end with someone catching pneumonia from walking home in a storm. Nina reluctantly agreed. They walked to Victor's car in silence, both drenched and cold. Once inside the warm vehicle, an unusual atmosphere settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but charged with unspoken thoughts and new understanding. Victor asked his driver to take them to Nina's address. During the drive, Victor asked more questions about the people Nina helped. She answered readily, painting detailed pictures of their lives and struggles. Victor found himself genuinely interested in these stories. Seeing humanity where he had previously seen only statistics about urban poverty, seeds of change. When they arrived at Nina's apartment building, located in a less affluent neighborhood, Victor finally spoke the thought that had been forming since their lunchtime conversation. He told Nina that she possessed something rare and valuable, not a skill that could be taught in business schools, but a quality of character that changed the world one person at a time. Nina smiled softly and thanked him for the kind words. She stepped out of the car, then turned back to say something that would echo in Victor's mind for days. She told him that everyone has the capacity for kindness. The question is whether we choose to act on it. With that simple statement, she closed the door and walked into her building. Victor sat in the car, long after she disappeared from view. His driver waited patiently, accustomed to his employer's long silences. But this silence felt different. Victor was not thinking about quarterly reports or market strategies. He was thinking about a young woman who had somehow cracked open a door in his heart that he thought had been sealed shut forever. He instructed his driver to take him home. But his mind remained fixed on one certainty. Nina Torres had changed something fundamental in him tonight, and he knew with absolute clarity that he wanted to do something significant to honor the lesson she had unknowingly taught him. The only question remaining was what form that action would take. Victor returned to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city skyline. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights. He poured himself a glass of water and stood by the floor-tisseling windows, his reflection staring back at him. For the first time in decades, he felt unsettled by his own success. His home contained every luxury money could buy. Expensive artwork adorned the walls. Designer furniture filled every room. Yet standing there alone, Victor realized how empty it all felt. Nina lived in a modest apartment with secondhand furniture, yet she radiated a fulfillment he had never achieved despite his billions. Sleep eluded him that night. He lay in his king-sized bed, mind racing with possibilities. By dawn, a plan had formed. It was bold, perhaps even reckless by his usual standards. But something about Nina's influence made him willing to take a different kind of risk. Not a financial calculation or business strategy, but a genuine investment in human potential and goodness. The morning decision, Tuesday morning, arrived with clear skies. Victor entered his office with renewed purpose. He called Patricia and asked her to schedule a private meeting with Nina Torres at the end of the workday. Patricia noted the unusual request, but made the arrangements without question. She had witnessed subtle changes in her employer over the past weeks and suspected the young accountant had something to do with it. Victor spent the day preparing. He reviewed company budgets, made several phone calls to his legal team, and drafted documents that would formalize his plan. His business associates would consider him foolish for what he intended to do, but their opinions no longer mattered as much as they once had. Nina had shown him a different measure of success, one that could not be calculated in spreadsheets or stock prices throughout the day. Nina worked at her desk unaware of the meeting scheduled for that evening. She processed invoices, reconciled accounts, and helped colleagues with complex calculations. During lunch, she counted the money remaining in her wallet and mentally planned her grocery store purchases for the evening. Mr. James had mentioned needing warmer socks, and Rita could use a new blanket before temperatures dropped further. The summons at 4:30 in the afternoon. Nina received a message asking her to come to the executive floor at 5 o'clock. Her stomach tightened with nervousness. 2 meetings with the CEO in 2 days seemed unusual and slightly alarming. She wondered if her performance had somehow fallen short of expectations. She finished her remaining tasks quickly, then freshened up in the restroom. Her reflection showed tired eyes and worry lines across her forehead. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had done her best work. Whatever this meeting brought, she would face it with honesty and grace. At exactly 5 o'clock, Nina knocked on the heavy door of Victor's office. His voice called for her to enter. She stepped inside, taking in the impressive space with its panoramic views of the city. Victor stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He turned when she entered, and his expression held something she could not quite identify. Warmth, perhaps, or determination. The proposal Victor invited Nina to sit in one of the comfortable chairs near his desk. He took the seat beside her rather than positioning himself behind the desk, a choice that immediately made the atmosphere feel less formal. Nina sat on the edge of her chair, hands folded in her lap. Waiting for him to speak, Victor began by thanking her for the conversation they had shared the previous day. He explained that it had prompted considerable reflection on his part. He spoke about how building his company had consumed his life for 30 years, leaving little room for connections or meaning beyond profit margins. He had become successful by conventional measures, but had lost touch with something essential along the way. Nina listened quietly, surprised by this vulnerability from someone known for being so guarded. Victor continued, explaining that watching her selfless actions had awakened something dormant within him. She had demonstrated that true wealth lay not in accumulation, but in generosity. Not in taking, but in giving. Not in isolation, but in community. He paused, meeting her eyes directly. Then he made his offer. He wanted to create a foundation dedicated to helping homeless individuals transition back into stable housing and employment. But he did not want to run it from a distance through impersonal bureaucracy. He wanted someone who understood these individuals as people, who had walked among them and earned their trust. Victor asked Nina to become the director of this foundation. He would provide substantial funding to cover operational costs, staff salaries, and direct assistance to those in need. Nina would receive a salary triple what she currently earned, along with benefits and resources to make a genuine difference in countless lives. The emotional response, Nina sat frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. Her mind struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the offer. Director of a foundation. Triple her current salary. The ability to help not just a handful of people each evening, but potentially hundreds or thousands. It seemed too extraordinary to be real. Tears welled in her eyes despite her efforts to maintain composure. She asked Victor if this was some kind of test or joke. He assured her with gentle firmness that he had never been more serious about anything in his professional life. He explained that she possessed qualities no business degree could teach: empathy, dedication, genuine care for others. These were the foundations upon which meaningful change could be built. Nina wiped her eyes, struggling to find words adequate to express what she felt. She thought about Mr. James, who could receive job training and housing assistance. Rita, who could get help navigating medical debt and finding stable work. Tommy, who could access education programs and mentorship. The possibilities overwhelmed her in the best possible way. She asked Victor one question through her tears. She wanted to know what had truly prompted this decision. What had changed in him to inspire such generosity? Victor smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually stern features. He told her the truth without embellishment. The truth revealed Victor. Explained that he had spent 3 decades believing that success meant climbing higher, earning more and standing apart from others. He had achieved everything he thought mattered, yet felt increasingly hollow inside. Watching Nina had shown him a different path. She had so little, but gave so much. She connected rather than separated. She lifted others rather than elevating only herself. He admitted that he did not know if he could ever match her natural capacity for kindness, but he wanted to try. This foundation represented his first genuine attempt to use his resources for something beyond profit. And he needed her guidance because she understood what he was only beginning to learn. Nina felt fresh tears streaming down her face. She had never imagined that her simple acts of kindness would create ripples reaching this far. She had helped a few people each evening because it felt right, never expecting recognition or reward. Yet somehow, small gestures had touched the heart of someone powerful enough to multiply their impact exponentially. A new partnership. Nina accepted the position with gratitude and excitement. But she made one request that surprised Victor. She wanted him to be actively involved in the foundation's work. Not just as a distant benefactor, but as someone who would meet the people they helped and understand their stories. She believed he had more capacity for connection than he realized, and she wanted to help him discover it. Victor agreed without hesitation. They shook hands, sealing a partnership that would transform both their lives. As Nina left his office that evening, she felt as though she were walking on air. The weight of financial stress that had pressed on her shoulders for years suddenly lifted. More importantly, she would have the resources to help people on a scale she had only dreamed about. The evening visit. Nina still went to the grocery store that evening, but this time she bought more than usual. She could afford it now, and her heart felt too full not to celebrate with her friends. When she crossed the street to where Mr. James, Rita, and Tommy waited, they noticed her radiant smile immediately. She sat with them and shared her news. Their joy matched her own as they celebrated this unexpected blessing. Mr. James said he always knew something special would come from her kindness. Rita hugged her tightly, crying happy tears. Tommy grinned and said he hoped the foundation would help people like him find their way forward. Nina promised them that they would be among the first to receive assistance. She would never forget where this journey began. Sitting on the sidewalk, sharing bread and conversation with people society had overlooked. They were her inspiration, her teachers, her friends. Victor stood at his office window, watching the scene below. He saw Nina's animated gestures as she shared her news. He saw the genuine happiness of the people surrounding her. He saw a community built on something more valuable than money could buy. For the first time in his adult life, Victor felt the stirring of something pure and uncomplicated. Hope. Not hope for increased profits or successful deals, but hope that he could become a better man. Hope that his wealth could serve a purpose beyond accumulation. Hope that connection and meaning were still possible, even for someone who had spent so long building walls around his heart. He picked up his phone and called his legal team. There was much work to do to establish the foundation properly, but he felt energized by the challenge in a way business ventures had not excited him in years. This was different. This mattered in a way that transcended quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. A new beginning. Over the following weeks, Victor and Nina worked closely to establish the foundation. They named it Second Chances, reflecting their belief that everyone deserved an opportunity to rebuild their lives. Victor attended meetings with social workers, housing advocates, and employment counselors. He listened to their expertise and learned about the complex challenges facing homeless populations. Nina brought her personal understanding of individual needs and her relationships with people living on the streets. Together, they created programs that addressed both immediate needs and long-term solutions. Emergency shelter, job training, mental health support, assistance with documentation, and legal issues. The foundation approached homelessness as a faceted problem requiring comprehensive solutions. Victor discovered that Nina had been right about his capacity for connection. As he met the people the foundation served and heard their stories, he found himself genuinely moved by their resilience and grateful for the opportunity to help. His reputation in the business community began to shift as word spread about his philanthropic work. Full circle 6 months after that rainy evening when everything changed, Second Chances held its official opening ceremony. Local media covered the event, highlighting the unusual partnership between a billionaire CEO and a former junior accountant. But Victor and Nina paid little attention to the publicity. They were too busy talking with the 50 individuals who had already found housing and employment through the foundation's programs. Mr. James attended wearing a new suit, employed once again as a tutor for underprivileged children. Rita had completed a program to update her nursing credentials and was working at a community health clinic. Tommy was enrolled in vocational training and living in transitional housing. Their transformations represented just the beginning of what Second Chances would accomplish. As the celebration continued, Victor found a quiet moment with Nina. He thanked her for showing him a different way to live. She smiled and reminded him that he had made the choice to change. She had simply been herself. He disagreed gently. Her authenticity and compassion had been the catalyst for everything that followed. Nina looked around at the people celebrating new beginnings and felt overwhelming gratitude. She had started with such simple intentions, just wanting to share a meal and show kindness to a few forgotten people. She never imagined it would lead to this moment, to this profound impact, to this partnership with someone who had become not just a colleague, but a true friend. The lasting impact. Victor returned to his office that evening, but it no longer felt like the isolated tower it once had been. His perspective had fundamentally shifted. Success now meant something entirely different. It meant the smile on Mr. James's face when he talked about his students. It meant Rita's tears of joy when she received her first paycheck in 3 years. It meant Tommy's growing confidence as he built new skills and friendships. The foundation continued to grow, helping more people each month. But beyond the numbers and success stories, something more profound had occurred. 2 people from vastly different worlds had connected over shared humanity. One had taught the other about generosity and compassion. The other had provided resources to amplify that kindness exponentially. Nina never stopped visiting people on the streets. Even with her new responsibilities, she knew that personal connection mattered as much as organizational support. And Victor often joined her now, no longer watching from above, but sitting beside her on the sidewalk, learning names and hearing stories. Their unlikely friendship had transformed both their lives and created ripples of positive change throughout the community. It proved that one person's consistent kindness could inspire another's generosity. And together, they could accomplish far more than either could achieve alone. The story of the millionaire surprised by his employees' generosity had become a story of mutual transformation, showing that sometimes the greatest wealth comes not from what we possess, but from what we choose to give away. The end.